Okay, so we're going to start up with exercise 213. And as promised, I'm going to pretend like the last 2 days didn't happen, and I'll go through the whole thing one more time. Because it's always good to have it over and over and over again. The emphasis today, though, is after you get your stepped sides drawn, how do you connect them together, and then how do you ultimately create the laser cut file for export and that sort of thing. So I'll go through that, and I'll spend the bulk of the time working on that part of the demonstration. But in the interest of practice, I'll walk all the way through everything. It'll go a little faster than I went in the first couple. But first thing that I'll do is I'll open up SketchUp and go find the terrain that I want to work with. I should also say, obviously, you guys have already passed the bulk of these steps, so don't go back and redo it again. You don't need to. Start from where you left off. So I'm going to go ahead and use the architectural design feet and inches as that loads up. We'll give it a second to pop up all its errors, because of course on the school computers we can't have everything work perfectly, so we have to have some errors. And once that's done, I'll be able to get my geolocation. There we go. There's our errors. Let me get rid of the little person here. Don't need him. And I'll go to File, Geolocation, Add Location. And this is where I'm going to pick a particular location. Let's go ahead and go into Mount Diablo and do something in here maybe. Yeah, like that. I'll click Select Region. We'll go ahead and grab it. And I can view this by going to Geolocation, Show Terrain. OK, that looks reasonable. And I can go from there. Obviously, this isn't the one that I'm going to use for today, but I'm just going through the practice. I'll go to File and then Save As. And we just want to make sure that this is a SketchUp 2013 file so that it's ready to come into Rhino. So I'll go ahead and save it into today's folder. What are we on? The 13 to... there we go. And I'll go ahead and save. Perfect. Then we'll go ahead and switch over into Rhino. And I'm going to create a new large object, inches. And eventually it'll open. There we go. And once I have this here, I'm going to bring in that SketchUp file. So I'll go to File and then Import. And I will pick that file that I just created. There's Mount Diablo. Let's bring that one in. Default SketchUp import options are just fine. We'll say OK. And then we'll zoom out. And we'll have a look at what the resulting piece is. So first off, I don't need this flat plane. We can make that go away. And then I'll clarify my layer structure here. We'll create a main layer called SketchUp. And I'll put all of the Google Earth terrain and snapshot and whatever, if I can hold down Shift correctly. There we go, onto the SketchUp layer. And then we'll minimize that and leave it for later on. We're going to create two other layers because I'm going to do the contours of this mesh to create the NURBS surface. So I will go in and create a contour X and a contour Y. And then I need to go ahead and make those contours. So with contour X selected, I'm going to go ahead and go up to Curve, Curve from Objects, Contour, or I can just type Contour. Select objects for the contours. It's going to be the mesh. I'll hit Enter. We'll start at this corner. If it's not snapping, remember to turn on your vertex snap. There it is. And we'll go off in the X direction here. And my interval, we'll do maybe 100 feet. There we go. I'll switch to contour Y as my layer. And we'll do the same thing from the same point. Go off in the Y direction, 100 feet. There we go. So I have contour X, contour Y. At this point, I'm going to turn off the SketchUp file altogether. I'm left with just the little wire mesh that represents my terrain. I need to trim off those extra pieces. So we'll come in here. Let's make top full. Like that. Once I have those selected, I'll go ahead and go to trim, and we'll get rid of the pieces on the sides here. There we go. So that's all nice and clean. Let me zoom extent so we can see the whole thing. It's clean edges. We're ready to make that NURBS surface. So in order to do that, I'm going to do the curve network or the network surface. I'll select my curves and either type network surface or go up to surface, curve network. Yeah, that's fine. Actually, before I do that, let me create a new layer. Let's call this terrain and make that the active layer. And then we'll do a network surface. There we go. It automatically recognized correctly. And we'll give it a little bit of time. Remember, this can take a few minutes to process. So let it go through. Yeah?
Last question, just a quick question. Whenever the layer is selected and we do any changes on the screen, is it automatically set to that layer, or do we have to change the layer?
As long as the layer, it's not so much selected, but as long as it has that little check mark next to it, that means it's the current layer. So anything that you do will show up on that layer.
And we don't have to right click on the layer to change that?
No, because it'll be on that layer by default. OK, so I have that. I'm going to click off and then click on the surface itself, which is, remember, that really dense surface. And I'll go ahead and rebuild that surface. So I'll type rebuild, or I can go to the edit menu and select rebuild. It would be under edit rebuild. And I'm going to do 100 by 100. And I'll go ahead and say OK. Remember, I thought that was about the happy medium point. You could do something a little bit finer if you wanted, or a little bit less. Let me turn off for the contours in X and Y, and we'll have a look at this surface. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's got a little bit of the triangulation, but it's reasonable. So I'm going to go with it as my 100 by 100. OK, so now that I have my terrain set up, now I need to start thinking about this as if it were a physical model that I was going to cut out. And that's where the little cheat sheet comes into play. So it was available on the course website, which of course I closed down, so it's not here for you to see anymore. It would be under exercises, and if you went to today's exercise, it's linked down at the bottom, but of course I'm not logged in, so you can't see it. But anyway, when we look at that, we're looking at that little chart. It's on the bottom of your handout anyway, just in case. And we're looking under the 11 by 17 size. And we're going to make a rectangle at the scale that we want to be at. So I'm going to use 1 to 250, which would be the rectangle would be 4250 feet by 2750 feet. So I'll go ahead and create a rectangle. And I'm going to move it later on, and I'll say at 4250 feet, comma 2750 feet. Remember to put those little feet signs in there. There we go. There's my rectangle, and now I just need to position it over the terrain in the place that I want. It can be a little challenging to figure out where that position is. Sometimes if you switch from wireframe into shaded mode, you can kind of see what's happening and pick the desired region. Sometimes you have to kind of look at it from the top view and decide which one looks right. Once you have that set up there, then it's a matter of I need to project this rectangle down onto the surface so I can trim off the extra. So I'll go back to the top view. There it is. I'm going to type project, or go to curve, curve from objects, project. It's going to ask me to select the curve first. So there's the curve I want to project. And I want to project it onto this surface. I'll go ahead and hit enter. And if I switch into the perspective view, we now see that that follows the contours of the surface itself. I can then go ahead and go to trim and trim off the extra bit of surface. This now is the piece of terrain that I'm going to model in its 3-dimension. And when I scale it down at 1 to 250, this is going to be 11 by 17, which fits nice and neat on the laser cutter, which is, of course, what I want. So now that I have this established, I need to do a few more things as part of this. I'll create a new layer, And on that new layer, let me rename it here. Come on. Oh, I have to get out of my trim. Sorry, there we go. Let me rename this, and I'll rename this one to be, let's call it model steps. It's the current layer, and I'm going to slice this piece of terrain up into the thickness of the cardboard that I'm making the model out of. So remember, the cardboard's 5/32 of an inch, assuming you use the bookstore cardboard. If you were using a different material, you'd have to measure it carefully. But I know it's 5/32, so we're good. And I need to find out on that chart again, at 5/32 of an inch, at 1 to 250 scale, how large is that step? It's 39.063 feet. So that little chart helps you out there. And when I create the contour, so I'll type contour, we'll start down here at this point. Remember, it has to go in the Z direction, so a lot of times you have to move into one of the side views to go straight up in the Z direction. There it is. And my interval, or my distance between contours, is going to be 39.063 feet. And I'll go ahead and hit Enter. And it will slice up this particular piece of terrain for me. At this point, I can go ahead and turn off my terrain and any of the other layers that I'm not working on. And now I need to go ahead and set up the steps for the sides of this particular piece. And like I said, we're going to concentrate on fixing the problems that happened last class as we go forward. But I'll go ahead and go through. I picked deliberately a contour that wasn't quite as steep as my last one, but I also have my last one ready. So I'll show you that one too, but I'll go ahead and go through this one because it's not going to take too long. So I'm going to create a new layer, or rename this layer, and we'll call this model sides. And I'm going to change the color of this layer to be red, just so that I can see it in contrast to the other things that I'm working on. And let's go ahead and put that up next to the model. And you know what? We could take this a step further and create a new layer called model, and then put the model steps and the model sides underneath the model layer in the interest of organization. I could also create a new, let me create a new layer that's outside of that stack. And I could rename this old work. And I could take Contour X through SketchUp and drop it onto the old work layer and minimize that. The more you start to get in the habit of cleaning your layers, the more when you have 150 layers, it suddenly is a little bit cleaner because you were thinking about it in the process. If you don't, you'll end up with a couple hundred layers and you'll be confused. So the more you clean that up, the easier it'll be long term. So I now have my model sides layer active, and I need to go ahead and draw the steps as they go. I'm going to start right here on this side. Remember, there's two different methods for doing this. Actually, I'll start on this side because it's fewer steps to do the first method. The first method, I'm going to go ahead and create little points on the ends of my lines. In this case, I don't want the single point. I'm going to right-click to get multiple points, and that will allow me to stick points on the ends of all of these curves. Like that. So I have that with all those points. I'm going to select those points, and I can do that by obviously dragging a box around them. If I do that, I have to deselect that curve because I don't need that curve. I could also type SELPT for select points, and it would select all of those points, just those points. Then I'll go ahead and rotate 3D to rotate these points down so that they're flat. I'll pick that point there. We'll go off into space, and we'll fold those down flat. Now I can go ahead and start to work through with my steps. We'll start at this point there, and we'll snap to perpendicular. We'll snap to perpendicular. This one, I have to go down, over, and back up. I know what the distance is. It was 39.063 feet. I can then go over and then start to work my way back up this side. So you guys are just going to have to bear with me for a little bit while I work through this. OK, so there, at that point, I'm going straight across, which means that I'll go straight across here. Then I have to go back down to catch this next point. which I don't get to because it's going just this distance. So this would be 39.063 feet. That will come over and then back up. So it's a little bit challenging to see what was happening there because I had just the crest of a hill and then I went back down and then I'm going back up again on this edge. So I'll work my way back up the rest of these pieces there. And I'll go ahead and I'll end. Oops. One more little piece right there. While I have it, let me join those two. And then I'm going to go back to rotate 3D. So I'll select my curve and then SELPT for the points. And then I'll rotate 3D. Same point that I rotated from last time. And we'll fold those back up. If I did it correctly, I can look at the side and say, yeah, it looks like the steps work and they all line up. I can also confirm that they're working by looking in one of the side views and seeing that all of the steps are vertical as opposed to being slanted. So that worked out pretty well. Now, as I start to look at this, remember I told you this time we were going to spend some time looking at the corners and how things connect and whatever. It looks like there's a tiny little bit of a contour here in the corner that was left over from my contour. This particular piece is never going to work on a laser cutter. It's just too small. So I'm going to go ahead and safely just get rid of that piece. And it's okay for you to do a little bit of editing like that. Likewise, this corner piece right there, it's pretty small. So I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of that as well. If the corner piece is big, or like in this case, this sliver, it's kind of borderline. It might be okay to be there. It might be too small. Worst case is it gets burned up on the laser cutter, and then you just don't put it on. So for right now, though, I'll leave that one. But I need to do the steps along the backside here, and then we'll concentrate on joining them together here in a second. So when I do the steps along the backside, instead of doing this point method, I'm going to change that C-plane and adjust it so that it's vertical running along here. And I do that by going to the little triangle next to where it says perspective, and I go to set C-plane 3 points. I'm going to start right there at that point. I'm going to go off in the X direction in this case. Then I need to make sure that I'm going up vertically from that point. So we'll go right here to where I'm going up vertically. And if we look at my little grid, it's flipped around to be in position. If you want to see a little bit more of that grid, you can right-click on the grid button. No, sorry, it's grid snap. Go to settings. There we go. And I'm going to just up to a grid line count of 2000 just so you can see it a little bit better. Once I have that C-plane changed and it looks the way I want, then I can draw just straight along one side. So we'll start right there and we'll come over until we meet that point. And then we'll go back down this side. Oops, looks like I made a mistake there. I wasn't quite on the end. There it is. Easiest way to do this is to hover over the point and then pull it back along the smart track line. So I hover and then I pull back until perpendicular. Hover and then pull back until perpendicular. Hover, pull back until perpendicular. Okay, here I am at the bottom of a valley. This has to go down by 39.063 feet. Straight down. Then we're going over. And then we start back up this side. Okay, so I finished to that point. So we have a corner, and I told you we'd start to consider the corners. And the contours don't meet conveniently at one of these corners at all. So what I need is I need to create an intersection in my lines such that the steps follow around. So this line right there is the next contour after this one. So there's a step between this level and that level, and I need to figure out where that step happens. Well, the step always happens at the next curve. So I would go straight here, and then wrap around my corner at the same level, and then step up here. So I'm going to go ahead and draw from this point, because my C-plane is still here. I'm going to draw down by the 39.063 feet. And I'll just draw out at some arbitrary distance that's past where my line is. Then I'm going to go back to my set C-plane world top to reset everything back to normal. And then I'll go from this point over till I meet up with that line. And it should show a perpendicular snap there. I can then trim this. Oops. So that that goes away. And I now have steps that meet where they're supposed to meet. So you kind of have to work your way around and see what's happening. Some of you will have a line that is exactly in the corner. And that may be the case over here. I'm not entirely sure yet. So let me go ahead and draw a line from here. And I'm going to go down by the 39.063 feet. And I'll come across there. Nope, and in this case it looks like, once again, they don't meet on that corner. So I'll go to trim. I'll get rid of that extra piece. You do want to make sure that the side is completely joined. So from there, I'll make sure that's joined, and I'll make sure that adds. So that's all one curve. That's going to make a difference later on. So the same thing would happen on these other sides of this particular model, and I'm not going to go through and do those other sides. What I am going to do is I'll save this for now, and then I'll open up my previous one from last class, and I'll show you those corners, because there's 4 corners to deal with there as well. So let me go in and save this for today so we can come back to it. All right, and then let me go ahead and open up oh, well, you know what? It looks like I don't have the one from last class. It must not have did its correct syncing. So I'll just continue around this one, and you guys will have to bear with me while I do a few extra steps. So let me go ahead and reset the C-plane to do this one along the front here. I'll go back to my little triangle, and I'll go to set C-plane. And this time it's going to be 3 points. I'll start right there. We're going to go off in the X direction first. And then we will go straight up from that point. There it is. We can confirm that it looks right in the 3D view, or in the perspective view. And then I'll go ahead and work my way up this side. I'm going to go straight across to catch that next contour, and then I'll start working my way down. Like that. Okay, so we have to do a quick little join. So I'll take this piece, and I'll type join, or go to edit and then join. And then I have to do this one last side of steps. So when I switch C-planes, remember I always go back to world top to reset everything. And then I go to set C-plane 3 points. This time we'll start on this side, but we're going to go off in this direction. But it does have to go straight up. There it is. And we can confirm that it looks right in the perspective view. And then I'll go ahead and work my way up this side of steps. So we'll go from here. So as I said today, once you feel like you've gotten to where all the corners are solved and whatever, it's not a bad idea to have me come by and check on you to see if the corners look correct, because you'll run into problems if they're not. So we're going to come across to right there. Then this is going to go back down. Yep, 39.063 feet. Go across, catch this point, and then start our steps back up. Across to that point, down 39.063. Oops. Feet. Straight down. And I'm going to leave this one long because, once again, it's going to match up with this point there. Perpendicular. A little bit of trimming there. Let me go ahead and reset the C-plane. So I'll go to Set C-plane, World Top. And I have one more corner to double check. Looks like this is going to have to go down, over, and then back up. So let me set that C-plane again. Let me go to Set C-plane. We'll go to 3 points. We'll set it right here. And we will go down by my 39.63 feet. Leave it a little long. This one will go down again by 39.063 feet. And they should meet perpendicular. And then we'll do a quick little trim like that. So now that I've gone through and I've made sure that all of my sides match up and that all of my steps look correct, I need to start thinking about this as a 3D model. And so this is essentially, we got to this point last class. Now we're going to start to do the new stuff and the new assembly and laser cut file from here. So I have these steps figured out. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these points on this side. So I'll type SELPT to select those points and then press delete so they go away. I don't want them to be confusing you. And then I want to make sure that each side is joined. So this side, for example, we'll type join. That's all one side. I'll go through and I'll look at this side. OK, that side is all joined. I'll look at this side. Looks like that needs to be joined. That needs to be joined. We'll go ahead and type join. Now that's one whole side. And then this one is the last piece plus that. Join. Great. So now I have those sides set up as well. Let me go ahead on my perspective view, and I'm going to set my C-plane back to world top. So I've reset it. And now I have to start thinking of these as if they're sides. So I need to have a rectangle that goes below, like I would cut it out. So I'll start at the lowest point. And in my case, it's this corner right here, I think. And I'm going to switch into one of the side views. And I'm going to go down an arbitrary amount. And so I could say, what would be the equivalent of an inch, or I could do 100 feet or whatever. It doesn't really matter. I could also just click. Okay, so I'll go ahead and just click. And at this point, I need to start creating the sides. So I can go back to the perspective view here. I can draw a line off in this direction. I can come to this corner and draw straight down. If I have perpendicular snap on, it'll come down and snap nicely to that point. And I'll go ahead and type trim. I'll get rid of that. Then I will select this plus the stepping side and type join. So now I have one closed curve that represents one side of my model. So I can then work my way around the model. We'll start here. We'll go back down to there. We'll go over, make it a little long, and essentially repeat this process. There's perpendicular, trim. Oops. Sorry, I had the wrong thing selected there. Trim. Get rid of that piece. We'll take those three pieces plus that piece and type join. So I have this closed curve now. So I have this one in front. I have this one along the side. As I come to the back, I'm going to do the same thing here. Go from this point down, over. From this point down to perpendicular. trim. There. And then join. It's going to be this plus that plus that. Oops. There we go. And then I have one more piece right here. This one's really easy because I already have both sides. So we'll go across and then back up. So I have that piece plus this piece, and I'll type join. So essentially, now that I've created those sides, it's just a matter of folding them flat so that they could be cut out. So it's a rotate 3D on all 4 of these sides. So I'll go ahead and type rotate 3D. We'll do this first one here, right along this base. Fold that one out. The only critical part here is that you're consistent. So if you fold them all out, that's fine. If you fold them all in, that's also fine, but they have to be consistent. So in my case, it makes more sense to do all of them out, right in place. So now I have all of those folded out. If I were to look at these in the top view now, you can see that, okay, I do have the stepping sides, and they've been sorted out. I can move those up above here so that they're separate from this if I want to. It's just a matter of what feels more comfortable for you. So the next piece is I actually need to have these contour lines projected down flat into a plane because I'm going to cut them out as a laser cutter too. So I'm going to do a new layer or a new sublayer here, and this is going to be the model. I'll call it model cut for right now. I'll make that the active layer. And then I'm going to create a surface. And it can be just a corner to corner right there. It could also just be an arbitrary surface that just floated in space. It makes no difference. And at this point, I'm going to project all of these lines onto that surface. So let me go into the top view. I'm going to select my model steps. I'm doing it from the layer so that I don't have to drag the objects. I'll type project, and I want to project it onto that surface. I'll go ahead and hit enter. And now I have all of those lines flat on a flat surface. At this point, I'll go ahead and turn off the model steps layer so that we're not confused anymore. We're looking at this flat now. And I'll go ahead and I'll delete that surface that I used for the projection. So you can start to see I'm coming up with the pieces of the puzzle here. So first thing that I have is I have my sides. Then I have all of these projected lines. Let me go ahead and draw one more rectangle right there, just for clarity purposes. Now let me take the sides, and I'm going to move them away. I'll just drag them out of the way. And so we have the sides that will be cut out, and we have one set of the topography lines that are here. Now as I start to envision this being cut out, I need to think about how these lines are going to be assembled together. And I should grab the example so that you can see it. If I cut all of these lines out, I'd have no way of stacking anything on anything else because they'd just be a bunch of individual lines. So it wouldn't help me much. So what I'm going to do in order to save space is I'm essentially going to cut every other line. And I'm going to cut this whole thing twice and flip. So let me explain. Okay? So the first thing that I'll do is I'll create a second copy of this exact piece of topography. So I'll type copy, and I'll move it over next to it. Then I'll start working my way up every other line. So in this case, I'll select this first one. I'll skip, and I'll select the second one. I'll skip and select the third, like that. I'm holding down Shift as I do it. I work my way up to this, which is a hill. Then I start going back down the other side. It would be this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. As I continue down this valley, it would be that one and that one. I have to work my way up this hill, so it would be this one, but not that. And then it would be working my way up here, here, ultimately to there. That one might or might not be. I have to go back and double check if it's the same as this piece or not. I'm guessing it probably is. So once I've selected all these, every other layer, I need to put them on an engrave layer. So let me go ahead and create a new sublayer. Oops, let me be on the model. New sublayer. We'll call this model engrave. And I'm going to change these objects to be on that particular layer. Let me clarify a little bit by changing these colors to red and blue, which are the cuts and fills of the laser cutter. In Rhino, if you pick the default blue and the default red, they are the pure reds that you need to do the cutting. And I'm guessing a lot of you have cut before, so you're familiar with the idea of red and blue lines. Okay? The blue lines are the engraved lines, the red lines are the cut lines. So in this particular setup, I started with this line as being the first one. That's an engrave. And I'm going to cut every other contour. When I come over here, I'm going to select the opposite set of lines. So instead of starting with this line, I'm going to start with that line. I'll hold down Shift, and I'll work my way up the terrain once again. I'll work my way down the valley here. It's going to be that one. And it's not going to be those two because I selected them over here. Once I have all of those selected, I'm going to change those layers onto the engrave layer. So let me change object layer. There we go. And so while these two look the same, they're actually opposites of each other. So each one is cutting every other contour. And when I go to assemble these pieces together, and like I said, I'll go get the actual example so that you guys can see it. Essentially what I'll do is I'll start with one piece from this stack, and then I'll glue on the next piece from the opposite stack. So it's almost like shuffling a deck of cards. You take one from one pile, one from the other pile, and you put them together. Then you take the next one from this pile and you stick it on top. Then you take one from this pile and you stick it on top. And they're all going to glue nicely on top of each other and therefore stack up to make your terrain. There are some issues when you go to actually do the physical model, and I'll do this in front of you so you can see it happen, where pieces don't quite fit exactly right, and so there's some techniques for how you kind of fake it a little bit along the edges. Generally, it has to do with compensating for the thickness of the material on the sides, and I'll show you how that particular piece works. So now that I have these two pieces ready to cut, I have my four sides ready to cut. That's all great. But if we think about cutting this out of material, we have a slight problem, and that is that there's a thickness to this material, and these four sides are the outer boundaries of my piece. So I know that there's 5/32 of an inch that I have to get rid of somehow. And so it's easier to do this after I shrink this down to scale, which we'll get to in a second. But I'm going to chop off 5/32 from these two longer sides so that when I glue them together, they'll fit at the appropriate side. I'm going to compensate for that thickness of the material. So it's now time to start doing our scale. I'm going to select all of the objects. I have them all ready. I'm going to type scale. Notice it's not scale 1D, it's not scale 2D, it's just regular old scale. It's going to scale everything at once. I'll hit enter. And I know that for this model, the long side is supposed to be 17 inches. Right? That's how I set it up. So if I scale from this point to that point, which currently is 4,250 feet, I can now say my new distance is going to be 17 inches. And when I hit enter, everything's going to go away, because I just went from 4,250 feet to 17 inches. So before you do anything else, type Z for zoom, followed by S for selected, and it'll recenter your view down to 17 inches. So we're now really, really tiny, okay, compared to what the full size of the model was. But I have the pieces that I need to go ahead and start building the laser cut file. So these two are ready. My sides are ready. What I need is I need some boundaries for the laser cutter bed so I can start to assemble how these work. Oh, and I did say I was going to cut off the 5/32 of an inch. So let me start with the 5/32 of an inch. Let me go ahead and go 5/32 inches. There it is. In that direction, we'll come across. I could also use my smart tracking, which is what I should have done. 5/32 inches. There it is. We'll come down to right there. Notice that that 5/32 is the same as one of the steps. This distance should be exactly the same as that distance because the steps are the thickness of the cardboard. So it should make sense. So I have those two pieces set up. I need the same thing over on this side. 5/32 inches. One more over here. 5/32 inches. Perfect. Now we need to do some trimming. So I'll type trim. Let's do it all at once here. And we'll get rid of that. We'll get rid of that.
Do all four sides have to be trimmed or just two?
Just two of the sides. OK, so I've now done that. Let's rejoin this and this together. I don't have to do that. Control, join. It just makes it easier to move and manipulate. And then join. Perfect. So now all my sides are joined. They're cut to the right size. I'm ready to go. But I need to figure out how these fit on the 24/12 laser cutter bed. So I'll do a couple more rectangles. And we'll start over here somewhere. Now it is possible that when I go to do this, see how I'm getting that red slash? It's because this is floating so far away from point 00. It's where our scales are so whacked out in Rhino that it's saying, wait a minute, I can't draw this line over here. You can certainly draw it related to one of your existing objects. So I could just pull my space over here, and then I could say at 24 inches, 12 inches. I could also move all of this back up to 0, 0, 0 so that it is back at the origin, in which case this won't be too problematic. So there's one laser cutter bed at 12/24. I'm probably going to need 3. So I'll go ahead and copy a few more here. There's 2, and there's 3. Now I need to assemble these pieces onto that. So we'll take this first one, and then it might actually be easier to do this in the top view. Zoom S for selected. There we go. I'll move this first one. There we go. Move the next one here. There. Now I need to start arranging these other pieces. So as long as I don't mirror them, I can rotate them. It's just important to make sure that I don't mirror them. OK, so now I have 3 pieces of cardboard that I would need to cut. All of my pieces fit on those 3 pieces of cardboard. And at this point, I just have to create an AutoCAD file to take over to the laser cutter. So it's pretty easy. So I'll select these objects, and I'll go to File, Export Selected. And I'm going to drop those into today's folder. So hold on a second here. Exercise 213, we'll call it AutoCAD, fall of 2017. AutoCAD. I'm going to make sure my save as type is set to AutoCAD.dwg, which is an AutoCAD drawing file. It's perfect. I'll go ahead and click on Save. The export options, we want 2004 polylines. That's just fine. It's nothing fancy, but we don't have anything fancy that we're doing anyway. And I'll go ahead and say OK. And I've now written my AutoCAD file. If I go in and I find that on my flash drive, go to my File Explorer here. There's that file. If I double click and I open it up in AutoCAD, we can confirm that everything looks the way it's supposed to look. This, by the way, pops up whenever AutoCAD opens a non-AutoCAD or Autodesk product file. Just go ahead and say continue. And there are my drawings ready to laser cut. Everything is set up correctly for the laser cut file except the line weights, which we can't do in Rhino. So we do have to do one little bit. If you struggle with this particular part, the lab tech should be able to help you do it. It's the one thing that you can do on the viewer over there. You don't have to have real AutoCAD. You can make this adjustment. To do that, I'm going to click on the layer properties right here. And I'm going to look at my layers. And the red and blue layers are set up the way that they should. The 0 layer is AutoCAD's default layer, so just ignore that. And I'm going to make sure that right here under line weight, instead of saying default, all of these are 0.00. So I'll go through and click on each one and say 0.00, which is what the laser cutter needs to recognize them as a cutting line. So each of those is 0.00. That's all I had to do. And I'll just click Save to save that file. At this point, I can put it on my flash drive and I can walk across to the laser cutter room and I can cut my file. So as part of your assignment, I ask you for a couple different things. Number one, obviously, I ask you for the physical model. But I also ask you to post the digital file to show that you've created the digital file. This shouldn't be a problem because you probably can finish it today. Okay? You do have to make a separate post, though, for your assignment 202 versus today's exercise, which is 213. So if you finish today and you have your AutoCAD file, you need 2 separate posts to do that. Okay? So it's just important that you recognize that, because I'm not going to go in and assume that your exercise 213 is complete. I want you to say, yes, this is my complete file. The reason that I ask you to post that digital file is so that you're done with the digital part. And then it's just a matter of going over and cutting and setting up your time for the laser cutter, etc. Okay? The laser cutter techs are supposed to be working now. I don't know exactly where they are, if they've posted anything or whatever, but as of today, when you're done, you should be able to go and cut. I will do a demonstration of this assembly thing next week. So you guys will see me actually sit down with a knife and glue it together. Alternatively, there is video of me doing it when the glue thing explodes, which is kind of entertaining. You can watch that one too. But I'll do it in front of you so we can talk through the process and you guys can see me do it anyway. And I'll go ahead and cut this one so you can see the full spectrum of it. So the hope is that you feel comfortable in getting all the way through this part today, and then we'll go through how you assemble it from then on. I forget when your AutoCAD file is due. I think it might be next week. I think you post it next week, and then the final version is due a week after or something like that. But double check the dates, because I don't remember off the top of my head in terms of where you're going.
On the 4th.
Okay, so the AutoCAD's due on the 4th. So like I said, you should probably be done with it today anyway, but make sure it's 2 separate posts. Are there any questions about everything I went through today?
Just one
No?
question.
Yeah.
You need 2 posts, just regular posts like we usually do with the program, and the other one for the AutoCAD, correct?
Right. One regular post just like you normally do for today's exercise 213, and then a separate post for assignment 202 with your AutoCAD file. And you probably need a screenshot or something that shows the red and blue, but I want the AutoCAD file too. All right.